How can Arthur fight the Romans and fight the Saxons? He's 250 years old. This is ridiculous. Well, it's not. He's two people. You see? They've welded Arthur the First in with Arthur the Second, on the bottom, who fights the Angles and Saxons. And by welding them together into one gigantic king, they caused the problem. Once you read the Welsh records, you sort them out with ease. And they're not a problem. And they both figure quite prominently, correctly in the history. All right? Let's get on a bit. See where we're going. I've put this one in because when in about 920, a fellow named Owen, the son of Howell the Good, who I mentioned before, his name's on Coelbren on a monument, 948. Around 920, Owen is getting married, so they drew up all the necessary king lists to prove all his ancestry and pedigree and marriage to all the other kings. The list of the kings of the West Midlands contains at the bottom, hang on, let's get back, a very interesting statement. It actually tells you where Glastonbury is. And it says this Glastonbury is called Lichfield. This is a bit of a shaker because it means that Glastonbury is 200 miles from where people think it is. And Glaston's in Cornish and in Breton is oak trees. Also Derwin and Glaston's is Welsh for oak, but also Glasdennan is the scarlet oak. And there's a long pedigree to this, but people have been looking in the wrong place because Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset wasn't founded until 942. So a little bit of history there. It does tell you what perhaps has been going on and how a bit of mayhem has been going on with the history. Okay? So what we've got basically here is Madoc is at sea, about 562. Gregory of Tours tells how the two great islands in the ocean. Gregory of Tours was in France, French nobleman and abbot. He writes the history of the Franks. He's alive at the time. Okay? His history still exists in great detail. He mentions how the two great islands in the ocean were smashed to pieces, set on fire from end to end, and people had to flee from them. So we've got a contemporary reference from another source outside the UK. Madoc's at sea, comet strikes Britain, okay? Jim, you can't spell Britain. 572, 10 years later, Madoc returns to Britain. 573, the Admiral verifies it. And 574, the King sails to the other world. It's what the Spanish call the New World. They call it the other world. The King is killed and mummified, 578. He's returned 579, put in an unmarked tomb, but it's well described in the Songs of the Graves. It's in great detail. They name the field. And in about 580, Merlin, who is Taliesin, several references to Merlin. He is, for I am Taliesin, means high intellect, and men shall call me Merlin, right? And he also says, for I am Merlin, and men shall call me Taliesin. Merlin actually is Merlin, it means little horse. These people are Gnostic Christians, and little horse is the sort of power appointed by God, Sabaoth, to control benignly the world with intelligence and with enlightenment. Sabaoth is enlightenment, little horse is enlightenment. So what he's saying, for I am Merlin, for I am enlightened, and men shall call me Taliesin, men shall call me high intellect. And the king is later buried out of the cave into St. Peter's Church at Caercaradoc. And it's well known there are 168 histories in England which say that he's buried at Caercaradoc. All you got to do is find Caercaradoc, it's not hard. Okay? What have we got here? Most of the writing in Coelbren was done on sticks. They didn't often write on stone. But fortunately for us, they did enough of it for us to prove it and check it out. There's one stone in London actually dug up in St. Paul's Cathedral churchyard, and Arthur is always associated in the romance stories with stones in St. Paul's Cathedral churchyard for some reason or other. And that stone tells how the country is in a fallen and rotten and terrible decayed state. And it also says that the king intends to take a voyage. And it ties in with the prophecies of Ere, the prophecies of towards that which is beyond, which they constantly call this place where we are now. And on that stone there are clear messages which tie in, and there is it's a carving which clearly indicates the great dragon that they identified as the comet. So they wrote mainly on stone. The interesting thing is that tracing things backwards, we got back, as you remember, from Britain to Etruria, back to the Turkish area. These people were coming through Asia Minor, Turkey, at the very time that another group of the same group were coming through, known to the Greeks as the Chimeroi. And in Herodotus, they're the Cimmerians. Herodotus was writing histories from 460 BC. Apparently, these are the people who were planted in northern Assyria by the kings of Assyria, and in the various libraries of emperors of Assyria that were dug up by Layard, the archaeologist. They're mentioned, and, well, they're not just mentioned, they're described as the Cymry, K-H-U-M-R-Y, the Cymry. The Cymry took off, if you read the second book of Esdras, the apocryphal book, and they moved westwards. Apparently when the mayhem was going on in the Assyrian Empire with the murder of the emperor by two of his sons. And they moved westwards, across the Euphrates, across the other branch of the Euphrates, and into Asia Minor. So there's a trace of these Cymry becoming the Chimeroi and Cimmerians, moving into this Trojan area around 650 BC. It's a very strange thing, but the Welsh are not the Welsh. That's an English word. It means strangers in High German. They call themselves the Cymry, K-H-U-M-R-Y. No different. And their language traces all the way back. Other strange thing is if you find the Bible and go through the Bible, you'll find a dozen or more references. There are one or two on the bottom of this page here from Ezekiel and from Numbers. And it says, Son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions, and they take another stick and write upon it for Joseph. The other one says from Numbers, take every one of them a rod, write thou every man's name upon his rod. And we all remember how Aaron throws down his rod, doesn't he, before Pharaoh, and it conquers the two rods of the Egyptian priests. They used to write on sticks too. So this writing on sticks is also recorded by the Hittites used to do it. This little alphabet was drawn up for Welsh school children in the 1800s by a couple of teachers, and you can see you've got at the bottom the Coelbren alphabet, or a version of it, and you've also got above it Ogham. And at the very top you've got the Arwen sign from which all these letters are derived, and Jim Michaels told you about that, how it appears on everything everywhere. In Britain it's on every government office, tax offices, Department of Agriculture offices, any jail they build, any army place, every piece of military equipment. So state cipher, and it's on documents of state signed by the king as far back as 1250 and probably earlier. It's a state sign. There we go. That's a stone. Where's this one from? Let me think now.
Grave Creek in the
That's Grave Creek, yeah. The interesting thing is it's obviously in a Coelbren alphabet. It's unmistakable, and you have the Christian cross on the bottom. That's the most significant feature of it, and the statement ties up very well, readable Welsh. That's the alphabet as preserved by John Williams and by Llewellyn Shawn. Llewellyn Shawn in 1560, John Williams published it in 1846. As you can see, he says, isn't it a little remarkable, all the above comprised, with 4 or 5 exceptions, all the old Etruscan or Pelasgic, he really means Phrygian, letters, which were probably but little different from Greek characters used in the time of Caesar. When Julius Caesar landed in the UK, he wrote his wars as he went along, to extol himself, and he said, the British letters are very similar to the Greek. Ammianus Marcellinus, another Roman writer, says, the Greeks got their letters from the British. A bit outlandish. And there is, of course, the ancient story of Abaris, the Druid, going to Greece around the year 650 and teaching the Greeks. You never know. Again, this is published in 1906 by a lady, and named Evans, and she again exhibits variants of these alphabets as the thing was being mutilated a little because they were mixing it with Latin in the Dark Ages. Okay? This is an inscription again from an overhang which I think is known as the pig pen in Kentucky. There's a guy who keeps pigs under this overhang. It's not quite a cave. You can see the Arwen sign, you can see a tomb mound, and you can see an inscription which is part of a larger inscription, and it tells how they're crying out from the tomb. Again, more of that inscription from the pig pen. We have translated and deciphered the entire thing. No problem there, Jim. That's another one, Coelbren inscription in America. This is a covenant inscription. It actually says, I'll translate it to you, towards strength to divide the land we are spread over purely, justly between our offspring in wisdom. So in order to be strong, we will stay, united, and we'll divide the land between each other, and we'll see that our offspring get fair shares. Right? What would you call it? Bill of Rights? I don't know, maybe a Declaration of Independence. It's a constitution, right?
It's in the Library of Mead Council.
Yeah, well, it exists there. This is a little stone that was found under the head of a man who was clearly a very important man in a very large grave mound. I think it's at Bat Creek.
Tennessee?
That's it, Tennessee, right. He had some bracelets which are believed to be not of American sort of provenance, in that they are smelted metal, and therefore they're copper and other alloyed metal bracelets, which apparently are of European smelting style. He did apparently have some wooden plugs with him, circular plugs, which have been carbon dated, which fetches from the 6th century. And I can remember getting a letter from Jim Michael, sitting down with my colleague, and we said, what's he got to say this time, This fellow Michael's getting a pest. And we sat down and looked at it, and we deciphered that stone. And we'd had photographs of it sent to us, and we said, he's got it upside down. We turned it the other way around, and we could read it. It actually says, the ruler Madoc he is, or to that effect. So it would appear that the man in this mound was named Madoc. Okay? Clearly important man from the size of the mound, so I'm told, and with the bits and pieces with it. Big tall man, bigger than the average Indian, about 6 feet, which you'd expect. And that's a nephew of Jim Michael's holding the stone. There you go again. Madoc he is, thou art the ruler, distinctly thou art the ruler. That's how it actually translates. That's another stone, obviously. I'm not sure how to say this. It's difficult to go with Welsh syntax. An Englishman will say, you're a clever lad, but a Welshman will say, there is a clever lad, you are. The syntax is backward speak. It's all over the place. It's not the same syntax as we would use in English. But it says, pure and fresh, sure and certain, the great flood to follow, that we think that's to render a strait. They're going through a strait, or a narrow confined pass of water. So they're going to try for the head of the Atlantic. Free and large, ample space, we're sailing either with Uther, or Uther actually means wonderful, so with Uther, taking off, he, what is pervading. These are just some lines from a very, very long poem of several hundred lines by Taliesin. It means Adushnai, Taliesin. I went for a while, Taliesin. So he went for a while, came back. And it says, repetitively through the poem, brought back, I mean they're bringing somebody back, through fog and mist, the chief wolf of heaven. Arthur is frequently alluded to as the chief wolf of heaven. In the time to gather harvests, we know roughly when he's due in. Brought back thine fair passage through the seas, right? The seas through. Brought back from Ere, and they're always referring to this distant place across the Western Ocean as Ere, to the churchyard on the brink and shore where the influx, it was brought to the Eweni estuary in Glamorgan, estuary of the river. Brought back the knight upon golden armour bearing. 3 accounts say he's got his golden armour on. 1 account also says there's a gold face mask. We don't know. Brought back in mind and thought with atonement to give extreme unction. So they brought him back perhaps to settle the succession to the throne. But if you don't bring him back, it could be mayhem as who's going to be king. Brought back, born, conveyed the leather bag. Courteous what is